The late afternoon sun pressed down on the cracked pavement, making everything shimmer like a mirage. Maya adjusted her worn-out backpack and tightened her grip around a stack of textbooks, weaving her way through the crowded street. The dust stuck to her skin, the heavy air clinging like an invisible burden, much like life itself. At just 22, Maya was living a life that demanded the strength of someone twice her age. University lectures in the morning, waitressing in the afternoon, tutoring high school kids at night, all for a dream her pockets couldn't afford but her heart stubbornly chased. As she hurried toward the cafe where she worked part-time, a glint caught her eye. Parked awkwardly along the curb was a luxury car, a black sport model that looked completely out of place in her struggling neighborhood. Its once polished body was now dulled with layers of dust. Someone had scrawled rude words on the windshield with their fingers. It looked forgotten, abandoned. Maya slowed down. "Poor thing," she murmured, stepping closer. She glanced around, no owner in sight, just the usual street vendors and busy pedestrians ignoring the neglected vehicle. Without thinking much, Maya fished a crumpled napkin out of her bag and began wiping away the offensive graffiti from the windshield. As she cleaned, she spoke softly to the car, almost teasingly, "You deserve better than this, you know. Just because you're broken doesn't mean you're worthless." Across the street, perched on a worn-out bench, a man watched her. He was dressed in shabby clothes, a beanie pulled low over his forehead, his shoes dusty and frayed. His hands, calloused and strong, rested loosely on his knees. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, and strangely gentle, never left Maya. Ethan Cole leaned back slightly, a ghost of a smile flickering on his face. Maya finished cleaning the windshield, stepping back to admire her small effort. Her reflection wavered in the newly clear glass. She laughed lightly to herself, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. And then she looked up. Her gaze found Ethan's across the street, curious brown meeting unreadable gray. For a second, they simply looked at each other. There was no pity in her eyes. No judgment. Just a simple, natural warmth, as if seeing him was no more unusual than seeing a friend. Maya, feeling a little shy under the stranger's steady gaze, offered a small, genuine smile. Ethan blinked, almost as if startled by the tenderness in that simple gesture. No one smiled at him like that anymore, not when he dressed like this. Slowly, he raised two fingers in a small, almost imperceptible salute. Maya chuckled under her breath, wiped her dusty hands on her jeans, and gave a playful little nod before heading into the cafe. Inside, the noise and heat hit her like a wave. Shouting customers, clanging dishes, the sharp back of her manager yelling for more coffee refills. "Maya, you're late again," snapped Mrs. Collins, wiping sweat from her forehead with a greasy towel. "Sorry, Mrs. Collins," Maya said, slipping into her apron. "The bus broke down. I ran the last 3 blocks." "Excuses don't pay the bills," the woman scowled, pointing toward the overflowing tables. "Move it." Maya smiled politely and hurried to the tables, balancing trays with the ease of someone used to doing a dozen things at once. But her mind kept drifting back to the broken car, and the homeless man with the kind, weary eyes. Across the street, Ethan still sat. He watched through the cafe window as Maya walked, never slowing, never frowning despite the chaos around her. She laughed with an old woman who spilled her tea. She bent down to tie a little boy's shoelace when he tripped. She offered a free cookie to a sad-looking teenager, slipping it onto the plate with a conspiratorial wink. Ethan rested his chin on his knuckles, studying her as a different kind of heat stirred in his chest. Kindness. It radiated from her, not the kind you wore like a badge to be noticed, but the kind you gave away without thinking, because you couldn't imagine doing otherwise. A waitress rushed past Maya, knocking into her hard enough to make her stumble. The tray she was carrying, loaded with dishes, wobbled dangerously. Customers gasped. In a flash, Maya steadied it. She laughed, easing the dishes onto the table with a little flourish like a magician pulling off a trick. The customers clapped, cheering. Maya bowed dramatically, making them all laugh harder. Ethan chuckled quietly to himself. Not many would have turned embarrassment into entertainment. He checked his watch, a sleek silver piece hidden under his loose sleeve. Time to go. Still, he lingered, watching as Maya grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the cafe door for a moment's breath. Her face tilted toward the fading sun, her features softening, beautiful not because of perfect makeup or expensive clothes, but because of the open-hearted spirit she wore without shame. As she turned to re-enter the cafe, Maya glanced back at the street. Their eyes met again. This time, she lifted her hand in a small wave, casual, like friends do. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan found himself lifting his hand to return it, without hesitation. Maya smiled and disappeared inside. Ethan leaned back on the bench, a slow, thoughtful smile curving his lips. He pulled out a small phone from his pocket and pressed speed dial. Start the evaluation, he said softly. I think I found her. The little silver bell above the cafe door jingled as the man stepped inside. Heads turned, not because he was important, but because he clearly wasn't. His beanie was still low, his jacket frayed at the cuffs, and his shoes carried more dust than leather. Ethan Cole, master of boardrooms and billionaire behind Cole Motors, had perfected the art of invisibility when he needed it. Today was no different. Maya was clearing a nearby table when she noticed him. Their eyes brushed again, fleeting, soft, and Maya offered a small smile before returning to stacking dishes. Behind the counter, a group of waitresses snickered. One nudged another with her elbow. Look what the cat dragged in, one muttered. Bet he doesn't even have money for coffee, another sneered, loud enough for half the cafe to hear. Ethan heard them. So did Maya. He kept his gaze low, approaching the counter without a word. The manager, Mrs. Collins, barely glanced at him before backing. You ordering or just loitering? Maya's heart pinched. She hated this, the way people talked to anyone who looked less than. She quickly crossed over, placing herself between Ethan and Mrs. Collins. I'll take his order, Maya said gently, flashing a polite smile at her boss. Turning to Ethan, she asked, What can I get you, sir? Sir? Ethan almost laughed. It had been a long time since anyone had said that word to him without irony. Just a black coffee, he said, voice low but steady. Maya nodded. Coming right up. He shuffled toward a corner booth, sitting where he could see the whole cafe, and most importantly, her. As she prepared his coffee, Maya slipped a blueberry muffin onto the tray. It wasn't protocol, technically, food had to be paid for upfront, but she couldn't bring herself to serve him just a bitter cup. When she placed the tray in front of him, she winked. Even kings need to eat, she teased lightly. For a moment, something flickered across Ethan's face. Surprise. Amusement. Maybe even something deeper. He let out a soft chuckle, barely more than a breath, and gave her a rare, real smile. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. Maya just shrugged. No charge. Consider it a royal decree. She turned back to her work, moving with a lightness that Ethan couldn't stop watching. The cafe bustled around him. Orders shouted. Plates clattered. The staff gossiped openly, sometimes tossing glances at him, laughing behind menus. But Maya was different. She treated everyone the same, the businessman tapping furiously on his laptop, the tired mother with 2 crying kids, the teenager nervously counting pennies for a sandwich. She knelt to pick up a toddler's dropped toy without being asked. She gave the exhausted mother an extra cup of water with a quiet smile. She didn't fake politeness, it was stitched into her soul. Ethan leaned back, pulled out a small, inconspicuous phone, and clicked record. He wasn't recording her for the world to see. He was recording her for himself, proof that somewhere, kindness hadn't gone extinct. Maya noticed him sitting alone for too long. Grabbing the coffee pot, she refilled his cup and chatted breezily. "Business slow today, Your Majesty," she teased again, nodding toward the empty seat across from him. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Something like that." "Well," Maya said, tilting her head, "even kings have bad days." There was no mockery in her voice, only warmth. A strange ache stirred in Ethan's chest. If only she knew. If only she knew the man she was calling a king could buy the entire street outside the window and never feel the dent. But Ethan said nothing. Some truths had to wait. Hours passed. Maya worked until her feet ached, never once snapping, never once sour. When the evening crowd thinned and her shift ended, she finally slumped into a chair behind the counter, massaging her ankles. Ethan rose slowly, dropping a crumpled bill, far more than the price of coffee, into the tip jar. As he passed her, he paused. "Thank you," he said again, voice deeper this time. Maya looked up, a bit surprised. She smiled easily. "You're welcome, sir. Come back anytime. We saved the best muffins for royalty." Ethan smiled, a real one, wide enough to crinkle the corners of his eyes, and walked out into the twilight. The bell above the door jingled faintly behind him. Outside, Ethan leaned against the wall, pulling his phone from his pocket. He stared down at the small recording, Maya wiping down a table, laughing with a child, offering a muffin with a wink. He pressed a number on his speed dial. The line rang once before a deep, professional voice answered, "Yes, sir." Ethan's eyes remained on the cafe window, where Maya was now laughing at something a coworker said. "She's different," he said quietly. "Prepare the next step." He hung up without waiting for a reply. The sun was already sinking low when Maya wiped the last table clean. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her heart still carried the small warmth from earlier, the way that homeless man, Ethan, had smiled when she gave him the muffin. Maybe, she thought, small kindness still mattered in the world. She was just untying her apron when Mrs. Collins's shrill voice sliced through the cafe. "Maya." The manager stormed out of the back office, holding up the cash register tray. "Where's the missing $20? Maya blinked, confused. "Missing? Don't play innocent," Mrs. Collins snapped, waving the tray. "You're the only one who touched the register today." I didn't take anything," Maya stammered, heart pounding. "You can check the cameras." "There are no working cameras," Collins smirked cruelly. "And I don't have time for thieves." She grabbed Maya's arm, shoving her toward the door. "You're fired." Customers stared as Maya stumbled outside, humiliated. Her cheeks burned with shame. "I didn't steal," she whispered to herself. "I would never." Her stomach churned. Without this job, how would she pay rent? How would she eat? She sat down on the curb, blinking back angry tears, trying to breathe. That's when she noticed it. A small folded piece of paper tucked under her backpack strap. Frowning, she pulled it free and unfolded it. In neat handwriting, it read: "Cleaner needed for luxury vehicles. Immediate start. High pay. No experience needed. Address below." There was no name, no phone number, just a street address. Maya stared at the paper, heart hammering. It felt odd. Too convenient. But then, her mind flickered back to the man from earlier. Ethan. The way he smiled, the way he treated her not like a servant or a nuisance, but a person. Somehow, thinking of him, made her feel safe. Gripping the paper tightly, Maya stood up. "Well," she muttered, squaring her shoulders. "I've cleaned worse things." The address led her to the edge of town, an old garage tucked between warehouses and empty lots. The fading sign above read, "Coal Auto Restoration." She hesitated at the entrance. The place looked deserted. Before she could change her mind, the door creaked open. Ethan stood there, cleaner now, in a faded jacket and jeans, but still humble, still familiar. His grey eyes warmed when he saw her. "You came," he said simply. Maya shifted awkwardly. "Got your invitation," she said, holding up the paper. "You're hiring." He nodded, stepping aside. "If you're still looking." She hesitated, but the thought of going home broke and defeated pushed her forward. Inside, the garage smelled of oil, rubber, and fresh polish. Rows of cars, some gleaming, some battered, lined the walls. Ethan handed her a pair of gloves from a workbench. "You'll need these," he said, voice low. "Wouldn't want you to ruin those pretty hands." The words slipped out before he could stop them. For a moment, they just stood there, his fingers brushing hers as he passed the gloves. Maya flushed, glancing away quickly, pretending to adjust the strap of her backpack. "I've ruined worse," she said lightly, trying to shake off the flutter in her chest. Ethan chuckled under his breath, turning toward the nearest car. "You'll start with the easier ones. Just cleaning, inside and out." "I'll show you." Maya nodded, grateful for something normal to focus on. She slipped on the gloves and followed him. Hours blurred by. Maya lost herself in the rhythm of scrubbing, polishing, wiping. The car seemed grateful somehow, gleaming under her careful hands. Ethan walked nearby, quiet but always within reach if she needed help. They didn't talk much, but every so often, Maya caught him watching her, not critically, but with a soft, thoughtful gaze. At one point, struggling with a particularly stubborn stain, she huffed in frustration. "Cars are like people," Ethan said suddenly, handing her a different cleaner. "Sometimes, you have to be patient. Not everything shines right away." Maya paused, meeting his eyes. There was a quiet sadness there, as if he wasn't just talking about cars. "I guess," she said softly, "even the broken ones deserve a second chance." Ethan smiled, not the polite one, but the real, slow one that reached his eyes. "Exactly." As night crept in, Ethan led her to a special corner of the garage. There, under a tarp, sat a familiar shape. He pulled the cover off, revealing the same black luxury car she'd cleaned outside the cafe. But now, it gleamed under the dim garage lights, polished to perfection, like a sleeping giant ready to wake. Maya gasped. This is yours." Ethan shrugged modestly. "Something like that." She ran a gloved hand over the smooth hood, marveling. "It's beautiful." "You made the first move," he said quietly. "You wiped off the dust when everyone else just laughed." Maya glanced at him, confused. But he only smiled, a secret smile, as if carrying 1,000 untold truths. She turned back to the car, heart swelling strangely. Maybe, just maybe, her broken dreams weren't so abandoned after all. Morning lights filtered through the cracked windows of the old garage, casting long golden beams across the polished cars. Dust floated lazily in the air, giving the place a soft, dreamlike glow. Maya rolled up the sleeves of her oversized hoodie, slipping on her gloves with a determined sigh. Another day, another dozen cars to clean. But somehow, this didn't feel like just a job. It felt like breathing life into forgotten things. She hummed under her breath as she walked, wiping down a crimson convertible. Every few minutes, she would pause to inspect her work, pursing her lips, squinting critically, then nodding in approval. Across the room, Ethan leaned casually against a workbench, pretending to examine an engine part while his eyes followed her movements. There was something magnetic about her, the way she threw her entire soul into even the smallest tasks, treating every dent and scratch like it mattered. Maya noticed him watching once, and flushed, quickly ducking behind the car. "Am I doing it wrong?" she called over teasingly. Ethan chuckled, low and warm. Doing it too well, actually. Might make the rest of us look bad. Maya grinned, peeking out. Well, someone's gotta raise the bar around here. Later, as she stretched on tiptoes to clean the windshield of a tall SUV, the ladder she was perched on wobbled dangerously. Whoa, she yelped, arms flailing. Before she could fall, strong hands caught the ladder and steadied it. Careful, Ethan said, his voice softer than usual. Maya clung to the side of the car, heart pounding, partly from the scare, partly from the feel of his hands so close. She looked down at him, their faces closer than they had ever been before. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Maya laughed breathlessly, breaking the tension. Guess I'm better with lowriders than giants. Ethan smiled, stepping back to give her space. Stick to what you're best at. Leave the heavy lifting to the heavy lifters. But you're not exactly heavyweight either, she teased, climbing down carefully. He chuckled. Touché. Hours passed like minutes. When Maya accidentally knocked over a bucket of soapy water, sending salt skimming across the floor, Ethan laughed for the first real time Maya had heard, a deep, rich sound that made her cheeks warm. Smooth, Your Majesty, he teased, referencing her muffin joke from days ago. Maya mock curtsied. Thank you, kind sir. I aim to impress. They cleaned up the mess together, bumping shoulders more than once, exchanging shy smiles. It felt easy. Natural. Unlike anything Maya was used to around men, where the air was often heavy with expectation or judgment. Here, with Ethan, she felt safe. Respected. Seen. As the afternoon wore on, Maya found herself chatting freely. I don't want to just clean cars, you know, she said, wiping her forehead with her sleeve. I want to design them. Build them. Ethan set down the cloth he was holding, genuinely curious. Why cars? He asked. Maya leaned against the hood of a freshly polished sedan, her gaze distant. Because cars carry stories. Families. Dreams. Memories. People laugh in them. Cry in them. Fall in love in them. She smiled sadly. Even broken cars still hold so much life. I want to design cars that deserve to be loved. Even when they're old. Even when they're broken. Ethan studied her, his heart tightening in a way he didn't expect. He wasn't used to people talking about objects with such reverence, and certainly not about people either. You will, he said quietly. Maya blinked. What? You build them, Ethan said, more family now. You build something the world can't ignore. The way he said it, not like a hope, but a certainty, made Maya's throat tighten. Thanks, she murmured, fiddling with her gloves to hide her emotion. Ethan smiled, stepping back, giving her space but staying close enough she could feel his presence. Near the end of the day, Ethan pretended to tinker with a toolkit while secretly watching Maya from the corner of his eye. She was struggling with the hood latch of an old, battered sedan that had clearly seen better days. He started to walk over, but then stopped. Maya, biting her lip in concentration, fiddled with the latch, twisted a small hidden release mechanism, and pop, the hood lifted. She beamed proudly, muttering, "There you go, old boy." Ethan smiled. A real, proud, aching smile he couldn't quite hide. He crossed his arms, pretending to examine a nearby tire, but his heart was quietly thudding against his ribs. She didn't wait for rescue. She didn't fold under difficulty. She fought. She figured it out. She won. Maya wiped her greasy hands on her jeans and turned to find Ethan watching. You saw that, didn't you? She said, half laughing, half challenging. I saw, he said simply. And? He shrugged, trying to play it cool. Might have a future mechanic on my hands. Maya smirked, tossing the rag at him playfully. He caught it easily, laughing. Don't sound so surprised, she teased. I'm not, he said, holding her gaze a bit longer than necessary. I never was. As the sun dipped lower, bathing the garage in gold, Maya finished her shift. Ethan leaned against the entrance, watching her pack up. Same time tomorrow, he asked casually. Maya slung her bag over her shoulder, giving him a tired but glowing smile. Wouldn't miss it. For a second, neither moved, a quiet, charged pause between them. Then Maya waved and disappeared into the evening light. Ethan stayed where he was, hands deep in his pockets, watching until she turned the corner and was gone. Only then did he allow himself to whisper under his breath. You're something else, Maya. He didn't realize he was smiling until the cool evening breeze teased the edges of his jacket, carrying the faint scent of soap and sunshine and possibility. The day started like any other. The buzz of machines, the smell of oil and polish in the air, Maya's soft humming as she wiped down a black sedan. Ethan watched her from his usual spot, leaning casually against the workbench, pretending to check inventory but really observing the way she moved with gentle determination. But something felt off. Whispers floated around the garage, workers glancing at Maya with narrowed eyes. Maya noticed it too, the shift in atmosphere, but she kept walking, refusing to shrink under the weight of suspicion. Then came the moment. Mr. Langston, the garage foreman, stormed out of the office waving a small cash box. Everyone stop, he barked, face red with anger. There's money missing from the parts payments. $200. The garage fell into tense silence. Langston's eyes zeroed in on Maya. You were near the office this morning, he accused. You cleaned there, didn't you? Maya froze, cloth still in her hand. Yes, but. No, but. Langston snapped. It's gone after you left. Other workers began murmuring. I saw her by the register too, someone added carelessly. She's new. Probably thought no one would notice. Ethan's fist clenched at his sides. He recognized the setup immediately, a test he hadn't authorized, designed by Langston and the others to humiliate Maya. He wanted to step in. Wanted to tear the whole garage apart for this cruelty. But he forced himself to stay silent, heart pounding, eyes never leaving her. He needed to see. Needed to know. Was she only kind when the world was kind back? Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. I didn't take anything, she said softly. Her voice wasn't trembling with panic. It wasn't angry either. It was sad. Defeated. I know what it's like to lose things, she added, lifting her chin. I would never do that to someone else. Langston sneered. Talk is cheap. Maya nodded once, a slight tremble in her hands as she peeled off her gloves. If you think I'm guilty, she said quietly, I'll leave. You're fired, Langston barked, satisfied. She nodded again, gathering her bag slowly, dignity intact even as the room turned colder around her. No tears. No begging. No accusations. Just the painful grace of a girl used to walking away from places that didn't believe in her. As Maya walked out of the garage, head bowed but unbroken, Ethan's heart cracked wide open. He watched her disappear into the afternoon haze, then threw Langston a look so cold the older man shrank back. You, Ethan said icily, just made the biggest mistake of your life. And without another word, he strode out after her. He followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. Maya's small figure moved through the dusty streets, shoulders stiff, steps tired. She didn't cry. She didn't even slow down. Just kept walking, one foot after another, as if the entire world's weight was strapped to her back and she refused to collapse. Finally, she turned into a narrow alley and disappeared into a crumbling building. Ethan hesitated, then approached quietly. Through a cracked window pane, he saw her. Inside, Maya sat on a mattress on the floor of a tiny one-room apartment. A flickering bulb barely lit the cracked walls. No bed frame. No furniture. Just a small stack of textbooks, a pile of neatly folded clothes, and a kettle on a rickety stove. Maya set her bag down, sighed heavily, then pulled a textbook into her lap. She opened it carefully, like a treasure, and began to study, lips moving soundlessly as she read formulas and diagrams. Her hair fell across her face. She pushed it back absently, frowning in concentration. There were dark circles under her eyes. Scrapes on her knuckles. A hole in her worn-out sneaker. But still, she studied. Still, she fought. Still, she dreamed. Ethan pressed his hand against the rough brick wall outside her window, feeling an ache inside him he hadn't known he was capable of. "You deserve the world, Maya," he whispered to the night. "And someday, I'll give it to you." His voice cracked slightly. He meant every word. No matter what it took. Pulling back from the window, Ethan pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he hadn't used in months. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Mr. Cole," a smooth voice answered. "Activate Plan Phoenix," Ethan said, his voice low but sharp. "I found the one. Prepare everything. I want the reveal ready in 1 week." A pause. "Understood, sir." Ethan hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He turned back one last time to look at Maya, hunched over her book, lost in determination. He smiled faintly. Not a businessman's smile. Not a strategist's smile. But a man's smile, raw, real, filled with something dangerously close to love. Then he disappeared into the shadows, already planning the empire he would tear apart if it meant building her a throne. Maya adjusted the hem of the simple, borrowed dress for the 100th time as she stood in front of the mirror. It wasn't anything fancy, soft blue cotton, a little faded, but it was the nicest thing she owned tonight. Her roommate, bless her, had loaned it with a wink. "You've been glowing lately. Trust me, you'll fit in. Maya wasn't so sure. The mysterious garage appreciation night invitation tucked into her bag felt surreal. She wasn't even sure why she'd been asked. She hadn't worked there long. And after how things ended. Still, something about the way Ethan had looked at her that day, the pride, the sorrow, made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe she deserved to feel seen, even just once. Gathering her courage, Maya stepped out into the evening light. The old garage didn't look the same. Strings of fairy lights draped the entrance, casting a warm glow over the driveway. Expensive luxury cars lined the curb, glossy, gleaming, nothing like the battered trucks she remembered. Maya's steps faltered. This wasn't a garage party. It looked like a gala. Before she could panic and turn around, a familiar figure stepped forward from the shadows. Ethan. But not the Ethan she knew in faded jeans and worn jackets. Tonight, he wore a tailored dark suit that hugged his tall frame perfectly. His beanie was gone, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed back, his jaw freshly shaven. He looked devastatingly handsome. For a moment, Ethan just stared. The world around him seemed to blur. Maya, standing nervously in that simple blue dress, dust in her hair, hope shining awkwardly in her eyes, was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He swallowed hard, stepped closer. "Miss Maya," he said, voice softer than she had ever heard it. Maya managed a small smile, cheeks burning. "Hey?" Ethan hesitated, then, with a shy, almost boyish gesture, offered his arm. "May I have the honor of escorting you inside?" Maya's heart skipped. No man had ever said anything like that to her, not with real respect, real tenderness. Slowly, she slid her hand through his arm. "I'd be honored," she whispered. They shared a quiet smile, and together, they stepped toward the entrance. The inside was even more stunning. Tables covered in white cloths. crystal glasses catching the fairy light. Soft music floated through the air. People mingled in fancy clothes, laughter and clinking glasses surrounding them. But Maya barely noticed any of it. All she could feel was Ethan's steady arm under her hand, the way his thumb brushed lightly against her knuckles, a small, grounding touch. "You look," Ethan began, then cleared his throat awkwardly. "You look incredible." Maya ducked her head, laughing softly. "You're just saying that because everyone else is dressed like royalty." "I'm saying it because it's true," he said simply. Their eyes met and held. Something warm bloomed between them. Something real. Before Maya could say anything more, the low hum of engines rumbled outside. Everyone turned. Down the street, a sleek black limousine pulled up, its windows glinting under the fairy lights. Maya watched, confused, as people began to murmur excitedly. Media vans screeched to a stop nearby. Reporters with cameras and microphones rushed toward the limo, forming a buzzing swarm. "What's happening?" Maya whispered to Ethan. He only smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." The driver stepped out, moving swiftly to open the back door. From inside, a tall figure emerged, dressed in a crisp, designer suit, exuding authority and effortless wealth. Flashes exploded from cameras. The crowd gasped. Maya's heart thudded against her ribs. The man from the limo turned, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Ethan. Or at least, someone who looked exactly like Ethan, but radiated an air of power she had never seen before. He stood tall, commanding, as reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Cole, any comment on the new automotive project?" "Mr. Cole, is this your latest charity venture?" "Mr. Cole, who's your guest tonight?" Maya's mouth went dry. "Mr. Cole," she whispered. "As in Cole Motors." Ethan turned toward her, the Ethan standing by her side, and gave a small, almost bashful smile. "The very same," he said. Maya froze. Everything clicked at once, the luxury cars, the garage transformation, the way he had always seemed just a little too careful, a little too invisible. "You're him," she said, voice shaking slightly. "You're Ethan Cole." He nodded, eyes never leaving hers. "I wanted you to know me before you knew this," he said softly. "Before the money. Before the fame. Before the lies. Only the truth. Only him." Maya staggered back a step, overwhelmed. The cameras. The reporters. The fairy lights. And Ethan, the homeless-looking man who had offered her gloves with trembling hands, now standing before her like a king. The world around Maya blurred into a whirlwind of lights, voices, and flashes. But all she could see was him. Ethan Cole, not the scruffy mechanic, not the quiet helper in dusty jeans, but the real man. The billionaire CEO who had watched her with those same steady grey eyes. Who had hidden himself just to see who would treat him like a person and not a prize. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. "You okay?" Ethan murmured, leaning down slightly, concern flashing across his features. Maya opened her mouth, but no words came out. She could only nod stiffly, her fingers tightening slightly around his offered arm. The familiar feel of his strength beneath her hand calmed her enough to breathe again. "I didn't expect this," she whispered, cheeks burning. "You weren't supposed to," he said gently. "You were only ever supposed to be yourself." He looked at her with something raw in his gaze, something that made Maya's knees almost buckle. Respect. Admiration. Something deeper she wasn't sure she dared name yet. "Come on," Ethan said quietly. "There's something I need to say." Before Maya could protest, he guided her toward the small stage set up near the center of the garage. People parted as they passed, whispering, cameras swiveling toward them. Maya wanted to sink into the floor, but Ethan's presence was a shield, warm and steady. At the microphone, Ethan let go of her hand reluctantly, stepping forward. He scanned the crowd, executives, press, workers from the garage, strangers in expensive suits, all waiting to hear him speak. But his eyes kept drifting back to Maya. He cleared his throat. "I suppose many of you are wondering why we're here tonight," Ethan began, voice steady. Maya watched, heart hammering. "This garage isn't about engines," he said. "It's not about profits. It's about beginnings." He paused, scanning the crowd again. "And tonight is about one beginning in particular." He glanced at Maya, soft, proud, inviting her to step forward. She shook her head frantically, but he smiled reassuringly and motioned her closer. Reluctantly, heart pounding so loud she was sure everyone could hear it, Maya stepped onto the edge of the stage. Ethan continued. "Several months ago, I set out on a personal project. To find someone who still believed that value isn't about wealth. That dignity isn't about titles." His voice thickened slightly. "And I found her." The room murmured, cameras flashed, but Ethan didn't flinch. He turned fully toward Maya, speaking now to her more than the audience. "I met Maya when she thought I was just another broken thing, forgotten, ignored." His mouth twitched into a smile. "She cleaned a dusty car no one else would touch. She served a man she thought had nothing to offer her." The room was utterly silent now. "And she did it with kindness. With heart. With no agenda except being human." Maya felt her throat tighten painfully. Tears blurred her vision. She covered her mouth with one hand, trembling slightly. Ethan stepped closer. "Tonight," he said, voice low, rich with emotion, "I'm here to announce a new initiative. A full-ride engineering scholarship for underprivileged students, named after the first person who reminded me why dreams matter." He turned, reaching behind the podium, and lifted a plaque. Engraved in gold letters. "The Maya Hart Engineering Foundation. Because even broken things deserve to shine." The room gasped. Maya stared in shock. Her name. Her dream. Ethan smiled at her, that soft, rare smile only she seemed to draw out of him. "And," he added, effective immediately, "Maya Hart will begin her paid internship at Coal Motors, on the fast track to joining our design team." The applause was thunderous. Maya barely heard it over the roaring in her ears. She stood frozen, overwhelmed, shaking her head slightly as if trying to wake from a dream. Ethan stepped closer, holding out his hand. She took it without thinking. He squeezed her fingers gently, grounding her. "You earned it, Maya," he said softly, "just for her. All of it." After the formalities, after the speeches and congratulations, after the cameras stopped flashing, Maya found herself standing under the fairy lights outside, clutching the plaque to her chest. She barely noticed the night air cooling or the stars beginning to prick the sky. Ethan found her there, hands casually in his pockets, watching her quietly. "You still breathing?" he teased lightly. Maya let out a shaky laugh. "Barely." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something lower, more personal. "I meant every word, you know." Maya looked up at him, eyes wide and glassy. "You changed my life," she whispered. "You didn't have to." He smiled, that small, private smile just for her. "You changed mine first," he said simply. For a long moment, they just stood there, inches apart. The night hummed softly around them, full of things unsaid, promises unspoken. Finally, shyly, Ethan offered his hand again. "May I have the honor," he murmured, echoing their earlier words, "of escorting you toward your future, Miss Maya." Maya laughed through her tears, slipping her fingers into his once more. "I thought you'd never ask." They walked into the night together, two dreamers, two fighters, two broken things who somehow made each other whole. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into another world. Maya sat in the gleaming glass lobby of Cole Motors headquarters, nervously clutching her new ID badge. Across the marble floors, executives in sharp suits strode past without glancing her way, but Maya didn't care. She was here. Not because of a favor. Not because of pity. But because someone had seen her worth before the world ever did. And that someone, Ethan, was waiting for her by the elevator, leaning casually against the wall, that familiar small smile tugging at his lips. "You made it," he said as she approached. Maya rolled her eyes playfully. "You sound surprised." "I'm not," he said. "But I am proud." She flushed, looking down at her shoes. The compliment, simple, genuine, meant more than she could say. He pressed the elevator button and they stepped inside. As the doors slid shut, Maya sneaked a glance at him. He wasn't the same Ethan she first met, at least, not on the outside. This Ethan wore designer suits, spoke in strategic terms, commanded rooms without raising his voice. But inside, he was still the man who had handed her gloves with trembling hands. Still the man who had steadied her ladder. Still the man who had seen something precious in her when no one else bothered to look. And somehow, she had seen him too. Maybe that's why their silences never felt empty. Maybe that's why standing next to him felt less like standing next to a CEO and more like standing next to home. The internship was intense. Long hours, endless blueprints, prototypes that failed more often than they succeeded. But Maya loved every minute of it. She stayed late, asked questions, scribbled designs in the margins of her notebooks. And sometimes, when she hit a wall, when she doubted if she was smart enough, good enough, she would find Ethan waiting by the exit. Sometimes with a coffee. Sometimes with a simple, grounding hand on her shoulder. Sometimes with nothing but a look that said, "You were made for this." One rainy afternoon, months later, Maya stood in the company's design lab, staring at her first completed model. A concept car she had designed herself, sleek, powerful, with lines that whispered of motion even when still. The Phoenix. She ran her hand lightly over the smooth hood, breath catching in her throat. "Looks like someone built something unforgettable," came a voice behind her. She turned, and there he was. Ethan, hands tucked into his pockets, rain glistening on his jacket, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room worth noticing. Maya laughed, a little breathlessly. "It's not perfect." "Neither are the best things," he said. They stood there, in the quiet hum of the lab, surrounded by possibilities. Finally, Maya spoke, voice soft. "Thank you," she said. "For believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "You made it easy." Maya blinked up at him, heart thudding. There it was again, that current between them, gentle but unstoppable, pulling them closer. She could have stepped back. Could have joked. Could have kept it safe. Instead, she said the truth. "You scare me," she admitted. Ethan's brows furrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because you make me want more," she said, words stumbling out in a rush. "Not just for myself. But for something bigger. Something, with you." The breath left his chest in a soft rush. Slowly, reverently, he lifted his hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to be scared," he said. "Whatever you want, we'll build it. Together." Maya laughed, half sobbing, half smiling. "And here I thought you were only good with engines," she teased. He grinned, wide, unguarded, beautiful. Then, without another word, he leaned down and kissed her. Softly. Slowly. Like he had been waiting forever but was in no rush if it meant doing it right. Maya melted into him, her hands fisting lightly in the front of his jacket. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was two broken pieces finding their perfect fit. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Ethan rested his forehead lightly against hers. "I love you, Maya," he said simply. No grand gestures. No promises he couldn't keep. Just the truth. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the words settle deep into her bones. "I love you too," she whispered back. And somehow, it felt like breathing. A few weeks later. The same dusty street where it all began. Maya, now in a simple but elegant suit, drove a sparkling black car, the Phoenix, with Ethan riding shotgun, one hand resting comfortably over hers on the gear shift. They slowed in front of the old cafe. Maya smiled wistfully at the crooked sign, the cheap door. "You know," she said, glancing at him. "If you hadn't been stubborn enough to sit there looking pitiful, none of this would have happened." He chuckled. "And if you hadn't stopped to clean a dusty car no one cared about, neither would have I." They sat there for a moment, letting the past and present collide quietly. Finally, Ethan squeezed her hand. "Ready for the next chapter?" Maya grinned. "I was born ready." They drove off into the fading sunlight, two dreamers, two fighters, two lovers, toward a future they would build, polish, and love, even if the world tried to leave it broken. Because they knew now. Broken things don't stay broken when someone believes in them enough to shine. If you believe kindness can change destinies, like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.